Thanks for tuning in to the PLR podcast, where we seek to build a network of leftists in the state of Rhode Island so that one day we can win local power. I'm Alex.
I'm Evan.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Carlos.
We're joined today for the full episode with Carlos, who will also be the guest for the second half of the show. So what's in the news?
Well, a couple days ago, I read something about Srgt. Hanley, Srgt. Joseph Hanley. You might remember him from last April when he pulled a man out of his car and then handcuffed him and then stepped on his legs, threatened to break his fingers and then beat him. Luckily, it was all caught on body camera, but it was going to be suppressed by PERA, which is the only oversight group in Rhode Island for the police. And they were going to hold on to it so that they could use it as evidence in a case.
Wait, they were going to use it as evidence in a case against him or for something else?
Against the police officer.
Yeah.
So what happened was they got this footage. It was footage from a body cam and footage from a civilian, just on the sidelines. And they took that as evidence, and they were going to use that in the prosecution. And this man Batista, who was the representative for the board over at PERA, and PERA, by the way, means the Providence External Review Authority. They wanted him to keep quiet so they could use this, and what ended up happening is he said, the people need to see this because this is completely fucked up, and it's not okay if we just sweep this under, hope the case goes our way, and if it does or doesn't, it is what it is. So he put it out there. He made it public. People were pissed because it's a fucking terrible and disturbing video, and he got fired. He got fired right afterwards. It was like a 6-3 vote or something like that with the Board of Representatives.
Do you guys think that they actually put it out there for a good reason, or because he already got called out for it?
So I was there in the Zoom call when he got fired. He did it because he was left with no other option. His only options were he would go rogue, do it, and show what he believed the people needed to see, something that the majority of the people of Providence who were involved in talking to PERA agreed with. And his other option was to stay quiet and watch this just go into purgatory with all other 30 to 40 other cases that PERA had, many of which are stuck because the Providence police refuse to work with PERA, or if they are working with PERA, they're waiting for the Providence police to do their own internal investigation first, and then assume that PERA will be okay with whatever their internal investigation was. Batista basically went out and sacrificed his own position, being the executive director, to make sure that he did the right thing. And it's something that many of the PERA board members had reasons as to why they voted to have him out, because there are some logical reasons why he shouldn't have done it, because it jeopardized PERA, as far as PERA is still part of the city, and if the city and city council were to ever want it to be something that they don't want to be around anymore, they could make it happen, and they can use that as a justification. But
so he undercut PERA? Is that
yes?
what happened?
Yeah, they wanted to suppress the video, and he said, no, the people need to see it. And then he put it out there, right?
He put it out there. He basically did something which arguably was maybe not the best move for some who wanted to make sure that PERA continued to being where it is now. But where PERA is now is stuck in purgatory with 30 to 40 other cases with nothing happening because the Providence police refuse to work with them. And there are members within PERA as well who PERA is meant to keep the police accountable, yet a lot of them do have their own sympathies towards the police, which are holding things back. So he basically did what he thought was right, which for myself and many others was the correct choice.
Is PERA a state organization, or is it a civil society organization?
So PERA is part of the city council.
Yeah.
PERA was formed after the Community Safety Act was passed, an ordinance which was one of the most in-depth ordinances to keep police accountable in the city. And the whole point of PERA was basically to make sure that police were held accountable, that they weren't racial profiling, they weren't doing this or that. It had members of the community, it had members appointed by the city council, it had members appointed by the mayor's office, and it was supposed to be a middle ground. But due to a variety of reasons, because it's been that middle ground, it's been, like I said, in purgatory.
Yeah, just kind of not doing enough of what it's supposed to do.
Sometimes you need radical action to do the right thing. It seems like Batista thought he was doing the right thing here, and it worked out because they're still going to use the footage and they're still going to go for criminal charges on him. They're not going to let that exposing of the video dissuade the case.
My thing is that, like, it seems like if a big call from civil society, right, from all of us, is that we need to police the police, or, you know, we want to abolish the police, but if we can't do that, then what we'll do is police the police. That sort of the liberal Democrat interjection is to say, oh, we can build the institutions to do that within the state as it already exists, rather than give it to an independent body of members of the community to do that. You know what I mean? So it seems like PERA is kind of the organization where it's the state policing its own employees rather than the community policing the state employees. You know what I mean?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't seem fulfilling.
The video was absolutely terrible. It was so fucked up. Like you were saying earlier, Carlos, they totally walked over the back of his legs, you know, looking around, seeing if anyone else was watching, and the threats that they made against him. And I think the charges that they gave to Gore, who was the person who was beat up, was disorderly conduct, yeah. I think. Just, you know, a total just bullshit charge they just threw at him because they just needed something to justify what they were doing. They showed up for a domestic, which wasn't even, like, a part of this. Gore had no part of this whatsoever. He was parked in a car down the street, and he was somehow finding himself, you know, under the heel in the same position that George Floyd was right a month before George Floyd was killed. So it's just, it's insane.
Damn.
It's a pattern of behavior by police, you know, to, like, throw punches first and then kind of figure shit out later. And then, of course, they will make threats to try to keep the information from getting out and use, like, intimidation. I call them jock tactics. Because that's, you know, it's kind of like the football player trying to get the nerds, like, milk money or whatever. But it's a pattern. That's one of the reasons why we're calling for the abolition of the police state, because they're terrorists. They're domestic terrorists.
You mean to tell me there's a relationship between jocks and police officers?
I know, it's hard to believe.
What? Yeah. What else is in the news today?
Well, I think that is an interesting segue, or an appropriate segue, to the stuff that I had done some research on, speaking about city council and things that people in positions of power did not want to get out. I'm talking, of course, about the city councilor, Michael Correa. He's the councilor for Ward 6, which covers parts of Olneyville in Providence. I didn't know, like, anything about city council, how city council worked, other than what I saw on Parks and Recreation. So
Love that show.
I mean, I have to go back now and rewatch it, knowing what I know. But I was like, everything I read, I was like, oh, that's what they were talking about. Okay, all right, got it. So I'm just gonna go over real quick, like, what even is city council and who the fuck is this guy? So in Providence, we have what's called a mayor-council government system, meaning there's an elected mayor, who we know is Eloisa, and then there's a separate set of elected city councilors who make the legislative decisions for a city, like the budget and city ordinances, which is a fancy word for laws. Providence has what's called the strong mayor form of government, as opposed to a weak mayor form, which is mostly found in like smaller towns, smaller than Providence, yeah, I guess. So that's just all to say that Elorza has more power to like do whatever he wants, but the council is there to like keep him in check. They're like the Sinbad, like babysitters, kind of.
The round table.
Yeah. They're like the brain trust to be like, or
I haven't heard a Sinbad reference in so long.
Listen.
Holy crap. That came out of nowhere.
Did I just date myself? So I always got Sinbad references on deck. Man, you should know this about me. We have 15 counselors for 15 different wards. They're all Democrats, which could be good or bad depending on who you are and how you feel. They have 4-year terms, but they can serve up to 3 consecutive terms, which is, if you do the math, that's 12 years that these people can individually be in charge of our city and things that happen. Theoretically, their jobs are to represent the concerns, needs, and issues of their constituents and work to improve the city's neighborhoods. Theoretically, like I said, that's officially what they're supposed to do. Sabina Matos, very cool name, is the council president. This Correa guy was the president pro tem, meaning he was like the second most powerful person in the council until yesterday when he resigned from that role, which I'll talk about in a second. He was elected to the city council in 2011, and the council themselves, like his peers, made him the boss man in 2018. So he's still, to be clear, he's still on the city council until 2023. He's just not in that upper position anymore. He's been the like tough on crime guy, and he's been an organizer of like neighborhood beautification projects, like planting trees and like trying to get like the police and the people together happily.
Make the people happy in whatever surface level way you can.
Right. I think Carlos mentioned earlier that he's kind of like a Libra in that he just like wants both teams to have fun. Like he doesn't really doesn't really care actually about anything, just like making everyone happy, which I don't want to be a government official on any kind of level because I also care about making everybody happy, but like dude, I would never do the things he's doing. But anyway, that's not the point. He's been in trouble before. In October of last year, there was an investigation launched based on a claim that he violated the code of ethics by somebody in the Department of Public Works who also sued him.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, this dingleberry is all bent out of shape because he got caught being a dingleberry. He got caught on tape spewing just like some truly disgusting hatred towards a trans non-binary person,
a person that he knows personally
because she ran for city council a couple of years ago in 2018.
Was she his opponent?
No, she's a different ward altogether, as far as I know.
Damn.
Justice Amir Gaines. She's like a poet, activist. I think I was just saying like everybody knows Justice. She's always at everything. She's always around. Like just a truly delightful, incredibly talented and gifted person. But even if she weren't, she's just a person.
Yeah.
And he had absolutely no business talking shit about her, whether he was being recorded or not. But he was being recorded, so he's sorry. He issued an apology, but really he's just sorry he got caught. But the things he was saying, he was like very preoccupied with her anatomy, which cis people seem to always be preoccupied with trans people's anatomy, and just like making jokes, which somehow is supposed to absolve him because like, oh, it was just a joke, you know.
He made some vile joke, and then someone in the room was like, dude, you're gonna get us fired.
Well, that was in response to saying that he wished he could throw a pot of hot coffee on another woman. That one, we don't know who that is. But
Holy crap.
This dude loves to joke about violence against women, and he loves to minimize the importance of respecting pronouns. They dead named, or they like attempted to dead name Justice, which like You don't do that. Even if you know the person's dead name, no, you don't. Like, you just never, ever, ever do that. And in a year when, like, or not even just one single year, although it is, like, the most deadly year on record for trans women, especially trans women of color, which Justice Amir is, we don't need people in the city council who are supposed to be theoretically representing us, speaking this way, and speaking this way because they have this implicit bias. And people like to say, oh, like, aren't things getting better all the time for trans people? And it's like, better than what, dude? Like, just because we have TV shows and stuff now, like, does not mean that we're safe. We have people in positions of power who are making jokes about our livelihoods. And I'm saying it's home for me because I'm a trans non-binary person, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of seeing this. And I'm not the only one, obviously. So a lot of people have been calling for his resignation. So he did resign yesterday. Correa did.
If only completely.
Well, yeah, but that's not how it works, unfortunately. I mean, he called her an it, dude. Like, how do you justify calling someone an it? I had a professor at a local university, I won't say which one or who he is, but who called me a he/she once in front of the class. And it's demeaning, man. It sucks. And for Correa to, like, apologize and be like, oh, I don't think I offended anybody. It's like, you knew exactly what you were doing. You called her an it in reference to an article that did use her correct pronouns, which is she, her.
I think part of the source, like, not the source, but part of what justifies it in these people's eyes is that they're surrounded by yes men and women. I mean, if you're a city councilman or woman, the people that are in your circle, they're there as your employees, right? And so when he's making these jokes and everything like that, they probably, like, laugh at him because they think that, like, if we don't laugh at him, we're going to lose our jobs, right? But, I mean, the good thing about this whole case is that somebody actually recorded him and then put it out there to be like, nah, man, like, this isn't funny,
Well, in the recordings, it's like he says stuff and people are kind of like, ugh, but, like, there's mostly kind of, like, stunned silence. I mean, they are Democrats, right? So, like, they are very, like, we're allies of the people, like, LGBT rainbow flag. Yeah. Look at my Facebook picture. It tells you everything you need to know. But he thought, like, I feel like this happens a lot with cis men especially. It's like he thought he was in a room of people who were on the same page as him. Yeah.
And Andy and I went over this in episode 1. The problem of Rhode Island Democrats is that I think people in Rhode Island understand that you win by running as a Democrat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your politics are even, like, close to, I don't know, Chuck Schumer or something like that. Like, there are people who are borderline Republicans that just ran as Democrats who won because of that label, which is part of the purpose of this podcast, is so that, like, when Rhode Islanders go to vote and they see the name of this councilman who's registered as a Democrat, they could say, nah, fuck this guy. Like, he's not really as, like, progressive as he wants to seem,
That's why the vote blue no matter who thing is such a huge problem.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why it's such a huge problem. But I don't know, this guy will be out in 2023. I think I heard that Justice is going to try to run again. I hope that she does. It's not, I don't live in Providence proper anymore, so none of this actually affects me, in a, like, legal way, but, I was in, let's see, I wrote it down. I looked at the map of the wards, which was very difficult to understand, but, in the West End, where I feel like probably a lot of listeners are, I think it's Ward 13, Olneyville, parts of Olneyville, it's either 6 or 15, 6 being this guy Correa's ward. Andy, without giving away too much about your locale, I will just say East Side residents are between 1 and 3, Fox Point being 1, and it just, like, going up from there. So I don't know what ward. I can't remember what ward she was. Ward 1, maybe. But so if she runs again, I hope that people get behind her, whether or not she runs again. And Justice, if you end up hearing this, I just want you to know, my dear, that we love you.
Yeah.
Also want to add, Councilman like Correa in his own ward, Ward 6, which is where I live as well. Many of these council people actually run unopposed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one's running against them. Many people don't really know what city council is, which is not something you can blame on folks. Because, how are people supposed to know what it is when they're not actually doing that much for the community that they claim they represent? And just keep an eye out, like check what ward you live in, see who's like your councilman, see what they're about. If you don't like it, and if it seems like maybe you ever have the consideration where you want to see things be better, maybe see who else lives in that area do you think would do a better job, or even if yourself think you can do a better job, why not?
Yeah,
try it out.
That's a good point.
They do have public forums, so you can go, like, in Parks and Recreation and, like, throw your flip-flop at them if they're doing something and then you want to speak out. That's, as Leslie Knope would say, a cornerstone of democracy.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's probably pretty cathartic. You sat in on some of those meetings and stuff, so you know it's good to be heard, right? Speak your piece.
It's good to say some stuff. Yeah. They don't, sometimes they probably don't remember it, or sometimes they do, and they just pretend they never saw you or heard you. But it's good to let them know that you exist.
Yeah,
let them know that you're watching.
We're watching. Yeah.
You know what's happening.
Yeah.
Let them know that, like, we all live in the same area, so we know what's up.
Yeah.
Did y'all see the video of the woman, the, like, young person who just, quote unquote, read the entire council for filth? She just, like, went, I don't want to appropriate a phrase, but, like, she just, like, went person by person and was like, like, you suck, your outfit's ugly, like, basically just like,
fuck you,
basically,
fuck you.
You're cool, like.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was so wonderful because she knew, she was like, you're not gonna take me seriously, I know that, so I'm just gonna do this because I feel like no one's ever done this to you before. And she, she was like, you age like shit when you're racist, and it was like, yes, this is so cool. Someone said it.
I dream about getting kicked out of City Hall.
We can make that a reality. Dreams do come true.
Maybe we should do an episode on what it takes to run for your city council, because there are a certain number of, like, signatures that you need, and you don't really need to be supported by the party unless you're being nominated by the party. So there is a lot of freedom, if you want to get out there and represent your community, and you think that you know what they want and you're able to communicate with them effectively, like, there is a way to do it. It's not unreachable. And if these people are just continually running and you're not being heard, it can be done.
It's a good idea to do an episode about, like, how to run, you know what I mean?
And then the second half of the episode will be the anarchist version, where
how not to run.
You don't run and you just make change in your community.
And one way to put it is, the people the bakery you go to every day, they know you way more than they ever know the council person that says they represent them.
Exactly.
Y'all hear that news about Troop closing? They had a Instagram the Instagram post about not being able to afford to stay open, like, full time or every day of the week, so they're cutting their hours down. I thought that was worth kind of bringing up in the context of the budget, which we had a whole episode about the budget, and Rhode Island just passed a budget, and I was reading through the budget that was accepted that the governor's going to sign any day now, and one thing that stood out to me, and this goes back to, it allocates funding for different cities, Providence being one of them, all the Rhode Island cities, is that in the context of Troop closing, what was most interesting is that most of the budget allocation for next year, or for this past year even, has gone to the public sphere as opposed to the private sphere. So what I mean is that the Rhode Island government is protecting itself. They haven't laid off employees. They haven't cut their own hours to try to save some money. And meanwhile, you have bars like Troop, with which, like, whether you like Troop or not doesn't matter. But the fact that, like, they applied for federal funding and they didn't get it. They had to go through all these hoops to try to get it. I just thought that, like, it's worth bringing up in this podcast, this budget problem to keep in mind, because it goes back to sort of voting in right representatives, right? Like the people that are aware of these community bakeries or bars or whatever that are really struggling, as opposed to just keeping your government afloat and making sure that they have triple figures at the end of the year.
The big thing with Troop for me was that Troop was a place that tried to do everything right as far as kissing ass too. I mean, no offense, Troop, but like showing your public support for local governance and stuff like that, showing your favor and helping with fundraisers and stuff like that, and then being a very successful business and jumping through all of these legal hoops to get what you want. And if a business like Troop can't do it, which has every means to get everything they want that's offered to them, then what does that say about all of these other, mom and pop or small, not as successful businesses that don't have all of this support, and all they haven't pledged such allegiance to their local politicians? And like, if Troop's being left out in the cold, you can be sure that everyone else is most definitely, there's no hope, and they are freezing to death, and these businesses will be falling.
There's always enough time to pay police overtime to beat on peaceful protesters.
Yeah.
And there is enough money to keep local businesses that are there to keep families alive, to keep continuing.
But like we talked about before we started recording, that you'll get council members or even Rhode Island House representatives or senators that will go to these local businesses and like do the ceremony for opening. You know what I mean? Like, they're so proud of this local mom and pop shop opening, but yet if it comes to sacrificing even a fraction of their paycheck to help those places stay afloat, forget about it. As the Rhode Island Italians would say, forget about it.
Forget about it.
I thought they were saying porket about it.
Forget about it. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not Italian. Nor do I eat deep dish pizza.
I like The Sopranos.
I do. I like that show too.
Yeah, that show's good.
Good show.
Anybody else have a news-worthy thing?
Did you bring any news to the table, Alex?
Actually, so for the listeners who don't know, I live in East Providence. So as much as I love the city of Providence and what's going on with the council, my heart is in East Providence currently, physically, literally. And there's this magazine.
Yeah, but we're like 30 seconds from Providence.
Yeah, I mean, we're right on the Washington Bridge.
We can see Providence from our bed.
If that's what you call my landlord, yes. This is the East Providence Reporter, which is free. It was delivered to my address, which I didn't know that East Providence had its own newspaper. I'm kind of glad it does. And I thought that it would be fun to end this segment of the show on something light. And this is a segment of the East Providence Reporter called Dave Says.
Oh, ooh,
shit.
Dave.
Right. And this is the holiday edition of the East Providence Reporter. And so, let me read this. Someone wrote to Dave, "Dear Dave, my husband and I usually have a few disagreements around the holidays when it comes to Christmas spending. Do you have any advice for eliminating this kind of thing and making the financial side of Christmas a little less stressful?" Eliminating it. Annihilating it. Help me annihilate these financial stresses,
It's
please.
annihilation time.
Yes.
Dave's response is categorically boomer, and I loved it for that reason. So, I mean, there's 3 points here that I think are worth reading. The first one is that he says, Christmas is December 25th every single year. So why not set aside a little each month leading up to the holidays?
Oh.
Dave understands that people in a pandemic have enough money to save a little bit each month leading up to the holidays. You guys got a big pot for the holidays that you've been saving up all year?
Never thought about that.
Did you save that COVID money? That's Dave's first piece of advice. Think long term. Think financially long term if you can. The second one, then make a general list of everything you'd like to spend money on for Christmas. I'm talking about the things we often overlook, like food, cards, party expenses, and decorations.
What's his third fucking thing? Check it twice.
Now, now make a gift list. Write a dollar amount beside each name or expense, which I thought was equally funny because, I don't know, like prices change from the beginning. Like he's telling you to do this in like the beginning of the year, right? Like on January 1st, I'm going to be like, all right, Carlos, what are we going to get Evan next Christmas? Let's think about this. Let's make a list and let's put aside, 10 cents every week so that we can afford Evan's gift. But prices change, right? Who can actually do that?
Sorry, I'm just doing the math in my head.
I don't know what that math is.
52 weeks times 10 cents. All right.
And then my favorite point to wrap this up is that Dave saying, if you really want to show your commitment, you and your spouse can sign your new budget. Signing your name is simple, psychological signal that means you're committed to your agreement. So
That sounds really romantic.
if you can't agree on a budget, make them sign it. Bring them to court to hold them to that budget.
What's Dave's qualifications here
Dave,
besides just being named Dave?
All right, Dave has some qualifications. He looks like he kind of looks like Santa Claus.
He looks like someone that like at a workers' party, he'd be going up like multiple times to like the buffet and just like sitting down eating all the casserole, or something like that.
I mean, that's fine, but that doesn't have anything to do with giving financial advice or telling people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
That's essentially what this is. And if you and your partner can't pull yourselves up by your bootstrap, have your partner sign a contract so that if they can't do it, you can bring them to court.
That sounds like a healthy relationship.
Yeah, Alex, I've been saying this. We don't sign enough stuff together.
Yeah, actually, you haven't seen the contracts I've printed out since before Christmas. Dave is a 7-time #1 national best-selling author, personal finance expert, and host of the Dave Ramsey Show.
Oh,
I
boy.
didn't want to use his last name, but whatever.
It's in the newspaper. It's okay to use his last name.
Well, the name of the show is the Dave Ramsey Show, but let's just say that might not be his real last name.
Is he related to Gordon Ramsay?
That might
Doesn't
be
say.
more clout than but he's been on Fox News, CNN, Fox
Ooh.
Business, and many more. I don't know what Dave has to do with East Providence. It doesn't say whether he lives here or not, but I'm going to assume that he does. And if he does, Dave, I just want you to know that the East Providence High School girls soccer team made it to state finals. And that is more important than your shitty financial advice.
I wish that instead of a single Dave says, it was Dave's say, and they just got lots of different Daves.
The Council of Daves.
Yeah. Dave's is actually a grocery store in Warwick. I don't know if there's one
I've been
else,
there, yeah. Everybody loves Dave's there.
So just get your financial advice from your grocer.
But that's not multiple Daves. That's possessive. That's Dave apostrophe S.
Dave's.
What do the workers have to say?
Yeah.
True.
Workers named Dave. Dave Matthews. Dave Chappelle.
David Duchovny.
David, you would.
Yeah.
Does anybody have financial advice for not getting into arguments with your partner about spending or not spending in the holiday that can replace Dave's advice?
Don't sign contracts.
Yeah, don't definitely don't sign a contract. That's good. Solid advice.
Do your best. That's it.
Homemade coupons are really cute.
Yeah.
Like free one back rub kind of a thing. I like those.
Good to know.
Yeah. So if you're broke, just...
Yeah, homemade stuff in general is pretty good. I mean, but I understand that there's
DIY.
like pressure on workers to buy things for their family, right? Like that making something isn't enough. That you like...
Well, commodities are like our signifier for every emotion,
Right.
be that,
Yeah. That's how you let somebody know how much they're worth.
That's exactly right. And the price point is what matters. So Dave says you got to save up so you can really show your significant other how much you love them. And let them know how much you love them before so you can have it in contract. Maybe if you really love them, you can change the contract and pay a little more.
You can't change the contract, Andy. You signed it.
You just got a small print in the bottom.
Ooh, there you go. Disclaimers, yeah, some footnotes. I'm going to stuff your stocking with just receipts.
Nice.
So today, Carlos obviously has been joining us. He's had this conversation with us so far. Can you tell us a little bit about the city council and what kind of dynamic that you see when you go there and contribute to the forum?
So, city council is an experience. For those who aren't really familiar with what city council is in general, you're familiar with what a mayor is. You have your city, in this case being the city of Providence. There's the mayor, but the mayor himself is not the one who's doing everything. If you live in a specific part of town, you'll notice that you might have your own city council person, which is essentially your representative for your part of Providence. There are 15 city council members, and each of them represent a different section, whether it's Oneyville, whether it's the East Side, whether it's the West End, so on and so on. And when it comes to Providence, you'll notice that each city council, they have their own things. They do things in regards to, like, they're in charge of making sure you have a park that has, like, some swings on it. They're in charge of whether there's going to be speed bumps or something like that there. But then when they all come together, they then are in charge of figuring out what the laws of the city will be, whether it's something small, like or depending on who you are, whether it's something small in regards to, like, are dirt bikes an issue or not, or in general, figuring out if police should be held accountable for doing terrible things or not. Because of that, like it was mentioned earlier in the first part, they're all Democrats, but as far as things go, one can't say they're entirely pro-police, but they are very complicit in the violence that the police do to regular people in Providence, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're queer. They're complicit in allowing it because the police are what uphold power. They themselves are all part of the same system. And because they're all part of the same system, not much is going to be done. Some may try, but the majority are all right with it. A lot of them are actually very pro-police, and their families are pro-police. And because of these dynamics, and because not only is it just city council each having their own words, having their own people they represent, all of them having different organizations of each one they represent, all basically colliding to figure out what the future of Providence should be like. And because of this is my favorite part of city council. Endless drama. The drama of city council will never end. And it's probably for the best. It's the wildest ride. If you have involved yourself in social justice, if you have involved yourself in any change on the city level, you've likely have experienced this drama. And this drama is as small as city council members just blocking things just because they don't like another person, or as big as they pass new laws in their city council that if they notice something happens, like let's say one council member gets indicted, there's no laws against like being city council and also being indicted, but maybe they had some issues with that person, so they decide, well, we're going to pass a law. If you're indicted, you can't be part of city council. That's it. And then majority end up voting for it, and then that's it for that person. And sometimes it turns out that that person was one of the most vocal members of city council who were pro making sure that the people of Providence weren't being harassed by the police. One of the most vocal people in city council to make sure that police are held accountable for things like the Community Safety Act, which was passed back in 2017, but before that he was taken off. The Providence Community Safety Act, of course, which fun fact, was changed to a different name called Providence Police Relations Act or something like that. There's a story behind that. I'll go to that really quickly. Long story short, the reason it had a name change was because the Providence Police, specifically the Providence FOP, Fraternity of Police. Yeah, police have their own fraternity. They're all frat bros.
Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that there's a connection between jocks and police officers?
Who would have known? It all comes full circle, doesn't it? But basically, the Fraternity of Police had put out a letter saying that not only calling the people who were protesting, or not even people protesting, people who were just at City Hall demanding that police are held accountable, they were calling them thugs. Mm-hmm. And you know who were there at City Hall? Majority of them were just young people, a lot of them high schoolers. So these police officers were basically calling young people thugs who just didn't want to be harassed by the police when they're just walking home just because of the color of their skin or because of the neighborhood they lived in. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the Providence Police said that a name like Community Safety Act was offensive because it implied that the Providence Police did not keep the community safe.
From the thugs to the thugs.
But we're snowflakes, right?
Yeah, we're the snowflakes.
So, yeah, back to real quick to end that off. So the drama, a lot of at City Council, again, is you have all of this going on, and then you have a vocal member of City Council who, at that time, happened to be indicted. Of course, indicted is more of an accusation, this and that. There's a lot going on in that end, but it was very interesting to see that they were never the first person to ever be indicted in like the history of like City Council. But it just came at an interesting time when they were a vocal member for keeping police accountable, that they, like many other city councils in the past, members in the past, or most politicians in the past, get indicted often. Just happened to be the one where they decided, all right, it's time to see if we can get rid of them, which they did.
Not even like indicted, but in some cases, it's like politicians become the most active when they're trying to block something that threatens them. You know what I mean? Like, we saw that with Bernie Sanders. Even if you don't like Bernie Sanders, it was like when he got close, you saw all of these establishment politicians kind of just come up, all of them drop off all at once, and then side with one person, you know? And it seems like that also happens on a local level, too. I wanted to ask, I mean, it got me thinking about the fact that, as you mentioned, most of the council members aren't anti-cop, but they're more of like, let's do something about like police reform or something like that, at least. And I wonder how much of it, and you might not know the answer to it, I don't know the answer to it, but I wonder how much of it has to do with the Providence Police Union and whether or not they're afraid of losing their favor.
Let's be realistic for this. From back when I was like more involved in this, when I was in City Hall and I was still in college, I started college and being more involved. And not only myself, a bunch of high schoolers, a bunch of like people who have been activists in the community for a very long time. We're all in City Hall, primarily there to like talk about how the police need to be held accountable. Meanwhile, while we would walk into City Hall for like a vote in regards to this, not all these votes were generally about like if it's going to pass or not. All of these votes are like, is this good? Is this not? Should we push it back? Should we have a different committee to like look over this ordinance, which is a very in-depth ordinance. There's like 12 key points, but it's like besides those key points, it like goes really in depth. You'll notice that if you're walking into City Hall, not only are there so many police officers there, and police officers usually aren't in City Hall that often. Like, if you go to City Hall for something where people are like talking about plastic bags, for example, you'll probably see like one cop there. But if you went in regards to something in regards to keeping them accountable for like the harassment and brutality they did to people, they were in there deep. There were so many police officers there, and then there were the off-duty police officers who made sure they were the first ones there that took over the entire front rows, took over the balcony seats in the front. They were there to make sure that people knew that they were there watching as an intimidation factor compared to like these young people who they were just kids, pretty much. The Province Police, FOP, the Fraternity of Police, their union, just were there to intimidate the regular people who just wanted to exist in the city without like the continuous violence that was perpetuated towards them.
Maybe not only the people, definitely the people, but also the council members that are going to be listening when they have to look at a wall of police officers, you know, in the face while they're getting all of this testimony from other people. Maybe they'll, you know, be scared to take a step or scared to act a certain way because they're, you know, faced with such opposition.
I also have remembered nights where I can't exactly remember names at this point. Some of them actually aren't even city councils anymore, because this is, again, it was back in 2017 when it was passed, so most of the things I remember is like 2016, 2015. A lot of these like city council members, when there were like votes, were just not be there. Like, you can be a city council person and just not be there. Mm-hmm. You can be having an excuse of like, oh, I had like this kind of surgery real quick, like last minute. Oh, sorry, I gotta sneeze it.
We're keeping that.
So part of it could be city council members skipping it. From what we understood, it just felt like, you know, it's only going to be like an hour. All they're doing is just sitting down, listening to people, then they say yes and no to something, and that was it. Yet they would always find an excuse to just not be there. Also, I just remember some city council members just never gave an excuse. They just weren't there.
Are city council members paid for being a city council member?
I'm not entirely certain of that, actually.
I don't imagine it being a voluntary thing.
I'm pretty sure they should be paid for it.
If they're paid, then that's extremely fucked up. Because, right, like, we're expected to show up for work every day and do what we do. And if we don't show up, if we call out, we're not paid. And yet, like, this seems like it's weird for a city council. So, yeah. Andy just looked up on average, a typical municipal council member in Rhode Island earns $3,819 a year. So that's actually not a lot, but it's still, like, for a year, it's not a lot, but it's still something.
But also in regards to that, city council members are not only, you know, they're paid, I guess that, but they're in charge of where the money goes for their community. They're in charge whether that money's going towards putting speed bumps or towards putting like a little park for like kids in a neighborhood to have enjoyment in.
How many, like, on average, if you had to guess, how many city council meetings are there per month maybe, or per year, you know?
There's a variety. As the current moment goes, like, for example, for myself, my most experience was going there like on a Thursday night every other week. It's all on their website. They have it all listed. A lot of them are just Zoom calls that you can join if you ever are interested in seeing what city council are doing. Just go on the city council Providence. Just Google Providence City Council. Look at the events. Click on it. You'll actually find a Zoom link. Those Zoom links only go up to 100 people. Usually they don't fulfill the 100 people, but they sometimes did. Like, recently, I recall like a lot of people spoke out against city council in regards to like when it came to police brutality. You know, hot topics it does, but a lot of it's also live streamed on YouTube. Mm-hmm. The links for that you can also find just putting like Providence City Council Zoom call or something like that.
Can you, for the listeners who don't know but who are interested, can you briefly go through some of the council members? And I mean, you don't need to know their exact politics, but at least give listeners a sense of a who's who of Providence City Council right now.
All right. So if you are living in Providence, you may know who your city council member is, or maybe you don't. So there are a few specifically that I personally am familiar with. For example, I'll start off with my own city council person, Michael Correa. If you listened earlier, Michael Correa had recently been exposed for saying some very heinous stuff. I think the only thing that was gone over was how they weren't respecting someone's pronouns, for example. And not only that, they were calling someone an it. But if we were to go a little more into that, not only that, there was an interesting part of it which like makes me think of like who they were probably referring to, but we don't know. But there's an unknown woman that they were referring to who they said if it was possible, they wanted to give them 9th degree burns. And not only
Michael
that,
Carrera said that, right?
yeah, not only that, wanted to like talk about how they wanted to throw them over the river. Like Michael Correa, they're a council person of like Oneyville, not really Oneyville. Oneyville is Sabina, but they're more in charge of like Manton / Mount Pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're someone like if you're a skater and you go to Greenway, they're the council person technically in charge of that area. We have a variety of other council members. So if you've listened to the news recently, there's the Councilwoman Joanne Ryan, Ward 5. Her area is more closely around Chalkstone to Mount Pleasant as well. And one thing recently, many activists had recently gone to her house and lit fireworks right in front of it. All of this during a Zoom call she was having in regards to the Providence police budget. And you want to know the best part about that night? The police came and they tried to like shoo away the protesters. And this one officer, I guess he didn't stretch before he tried running at a protester, but he started running and then he pulled a hamstring.
Oh,
It's all on video.
always stretch before
on
you run.
Uprise
please.
RI.
Yeah,
They didn't teach them that at the fraternity.
Yeah, the
Dudes love stretching.
Well, they usually just hit you with the squad car, right? I think chasing after people might be a little.
Police don't know how to run.
my thing is like if cops can come to a city council meeting in mass to intimidate people, then
The thugs need to make a thug union. Oh my god.
then the thugs, I mean, you can create a union, but I mean, then, you know, if you're brought to a point of lighting fireworks in front of a council person's house, that means that you're not being listened to, right? And that like you're doing this because you're trying to draw their attention and probably maybe intimidate her, you know? And if the cops can do that with impunity, then so should protesters.
Yeah, and a lot of these things are done as a last result, like you said. Like these council members, not all of them. Some of them are great for the community, but for the ones that aren't, they don't care. They especially like Joanne. Like if you were to look at that area, it's a very nice area.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you step like a street over, because it's right next to Chalkstone, you see the poverty. You see how things are falling apart. And it's like very obvious to know like focus is always on very specific parts in which those of like who are making more money, who have more wealth, are being treated better. They're the ones that have this cool little nice river. Meanwhile, the other part of her ward, people there are like barely making ends meet.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the last council members I can go over real quick that's in relation to something that was brought up where cops running over people is Councilman James Taylor of Ward 8.
Hey, that name.
So there's
not the singer, to
Not
be
the singer.
clear, everyone.
James Taylor doesn't like me.
So, dude, I don't like him.
So
Yeah, is
James
that a real
Taylor,
person?
his ward is like more around the Elmwood area, so like south side of Providence. One of the things you might have noticed recently, which was one of the larger protests that happened in Providence, happened because people were just riding their bikes around the city, and someone was riding a moped. And riding a moped is not riding a motorcycle. It's not riding a ATV. But a police officer decided that they wanted to run this person over. Mm-hmm. This person, Jamal, he was only 24 years old. I'm 24. So someone my age was run over by a cop. Or the police are still arguing about that. But even in every video, you see a variety of things. Whether it's they're saying, oh, the police officer actually ran over a street sign. But like, why are police officers running over street signs? And not only that, if you look at the actual body cam footage, that street sign that they're saying that was the only thing they run over was on top of the body of... Luckily, they're still alive. They were in a coma for a very long time. They're recovering, very luckily. Was on top of their body while they were like laid out unconscious. And then one officer even tried dragging them until they were told to stop. And another officer maybe it was the same officer. I can't entirely remember, but for some reason, this person was on a moped who was hurt because of a police officer's actions. They saw, let me just get this Narcan real quick. There's probably no negative effects of putting like a Narcan into someone, but like out of all the things of this entire situation, you just decide you're just gonna put a Narcan and then that's gonna solve whatever's going on here.
That's probably a very racist thing to be thinking.
Say,
it's like, oh, this guy's probably on fucking drugs.
He's riding a moped.
Oh, he's not getting up after I ran him over and he hit the brick wall. He must be overdosing. Let me hit him with the Narcan.
Yeah,
fucking idiot.
There's a lot to that situation, and I can get that. I can get to that real quick, but let me end off with this councilman. He is very pro-police. Again, Ward 8. One of the things I remember very much about him was not entirely about him, but about his son. I won't name his son, but if there's one thing I remember about his son is that he had talked about wanting to ambush protesters.
Oof.
Nice.
In this Providence Facebook group called the Providence Ward 8. And it's funny because I saw that it was deleted as well right afterwards. And I know it was deleted by his dad, who is the admin of Providence Ward 8. But seeing that his own son would say that he wants to, again, quote unquote, ambush protesters, which there's many ways you can take that, but it's very obvious where the majority of those takes go in regards to saying you want to ambush a protester.
Yeah, he's not going to surprise you with flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of that kid that shot protesters and then like isn't being punished for it. I mean,
Kyle Rittenhouse?
Yeah, I forgot his name, but that's it. This reminds me of that, right? Like, people say these things and you're supposed to be like, oh no, it's just a kid, he's just joking, or she's just joking, or whoever is just joking, but at the same time, like, that's not a joke. It's not funny. You know, you should take it serious at any time.
So you see these like councilmen like James Taylor who are pro-police, seeing like their own son like wanting to like ambush protesters, and they themselves, like majority want to shut down any like conversation in regards to like people having like issues with the police, like harassing them in that ward, to then seeing that the end result of all that leads to an officer running down or like chasing, and there's also no chase order in Providence in regards to it, yet a police officer chased enough to quote unquote, I guess, hit a stop sign, which eventually led to it somehow being on top of the unconscious body of someone who was riding a moped, which isn't illegal to ride. Whether it was registered or not doesn't matter. It was a moped.
The shit that they come up with to like justify doing something like that always baffles my mind. Like, I mean, we're just aiming for this stop sign. We weren't aiming for this person who, according to us, violated a law. It's really stretching the truth. It's crazy.
Police in general don't even know what the law is.
Yeah, well, they're not required to.
Well, I think that act of chasing them to the point where they either crashed because they were scared for their life or they were hit and thrown off the moped shows that they were either negligent in their knowledge of how to do their job, where they didn't understand that they probably shouldn't be doing this over something as minuscule as like a small civil infraction of not having a registered moped, if that was even the reason, or it's some kind of like negative animosity towards him as a person, because he was related to someone who's a protester as well, right?
Jamal?
Yes.
If I remember correctly, this happened afterwards. So if you're in Providence, you might recall, and it was large in the news. It was, from my experience, one of the largest protests in this city I've ever been a part of. There were people on ATVs, motorbikes all over. It was a giant size. People going from the Knights Memorial Library down towards the Providence Police Station. A large amount of people.
Was this one of the summer Black Lives Matter protests?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was a protest in regards to what happened to Jamal, the one who was riding a moped.
Oh yeah, it was a protest for that. Okay.
So that's why there was a lot of people who were part of like the crew who were riding ATVs and dirt bikes. I remember in news, it's not something I knew that night, but it's something I learned later on, that I want to say their cousin was brutalized by police as well, and then were also sent to the hospital. That night, I've had my own experience where it was one of the nights I felt most powerless when I was leaving, because towards the end of the night, the Providence police started just beating on people. They were straight up beating on them. And there was people trying to leave, or not even just people trying to leave. Someone that I personally knew was trying to do. They weren't trying to do anything towards the Providence police. They were trying to help someone, and in response to them trying to help someone, they were surrounded by police, and the police just beat the living hell out of them. Brought them to the floor. They were bloodied, and there was nothing we could do, because if we were to move or do anything, we would have ourselves have been beaten and then taken in that same night. The Providence police went out of control that night only because maybe out of like hundreds and hundreds of people being out and about that city, like 3 people threw water bottles, and like maybe 2 people shot fireworks at them. Boo hoo! They had riot gear and all that on. They were ready for some things to go on. I remember seeing the Providence police having their attack dogs ready, having like people on the rooftops on the left side in their little parking lot on top of the Providence police station. That it's really interesting knowing that a police station is in the shape of a gun, but that's its own thing. Only for like later on that night for them to like start going at protesters, like closing in on them so just they can beat them. And it's not the only time.
Yeah.
I've seen Cranston police with Providence police and state police pepper spray people when it came to the Cranston line of a different protest, and like there was this older lady, she was pepper sprayed in the face and she was on the ground, and then medics were helping her, only to remember that later that night I want to say it was 2 street medics who were arrested. And street medics, if people don't know, their entire goal is to make sure people are safe. If someone needs some sort of medical attention, they are there specifically to help people.
Yeah.
And also, that same night, a legal observer was also arrested. And a legal observer's goal is to specifically, as the name implies, be an illegal observer, to make sure that they're there to provide support in regards to if some sort of law was broken, to keep who they need to keep safe in regards to the law. Yep. So to see that police arrested someone who's basically a lawyer, a legal observer, and 2 medics at a protest who, again, have their own specific roles that aren't the same as just like standing in front of police officers, shows that there's a real issue when it comes to the police in our city and state.
Can I ask you to kind of loop back to a point that we've been making throughout this podcast and even in this episode? James Taylor, that's his name? Mm-hmm. Is he a Democrat?
They're all Democrats, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the people representing us, and these are the people who are pro-police.
Or not even pro-police, but allow their sons or whatever to...
Yeah, I mean, if the son is saying this stuff online, imagine, like, where did he get all that from? You know, like, imagine the conversations going on in that household.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with his son. His son I've seen around, like, the south side, like, renting these, like, you ever see those really, like, luxury-looking 3-wheel cars?
Yeah.
Yeah, his son's really into those. He's always riding around those in the south side of Prov. Only, like, you know, south side of Prov, which, like, if you're familiar with that part of Providence, a majority of it is specifically people of color, to then see this one white dude in his, like, luxury-looking, like, rented car, who then says he wants to, like, ambush protesters who are protesting police brutality, which again circles back to affecting majority people of color.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Carlos. You have a musical sample or a song that you requested to play at the end of the episode. Do you want to introduce them, or do you want me to?
Yeah. Which song were we doing again?
We're doing Raw.
Heck yeah. So Raw is a song by the legendary, the greatest of folks, cult fiction.
Yeah.
If anything, we're not pro-jocks. Most jocks, pretty lame. But if we were to have jocks that were pretty great, those jocks would be in a band called Cult Fiction.
Hey, here we go. So the closing song is Raw by Cult Fiction, who are from various places in the area. Thanks for listening.